You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Thanks for tuning in to the Lawyer Stories podcast. Our upcoming guest is former Harvard Law School professor and constitutional and criminal lawyer Alan Dershowitz. Please be advised that there might be some controversial topics discussed. However, my goal for this episode and every episode is to bring a non-biased approach to interviews in order to bring out our guests' personal stories, pivotal information, and insights. Please enjoy this discussion I had with Alan and the important advice shared by this 50-year tenured Harvard law professor. Cheers. Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we're very excited to welcome in Alan Dershowitz, professor at Harvard Law School for 50 years, now Emeritus. Active in litigation, writing, and defense of civil liberties and human rights. America's most Jewish defender. How are you, sir? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. So just to let you know, before I went to law school, I was really intrigued by constitutional law and like a lot of the writings you were putting out. And I found this book and I brought it with me to Miami. This was like 18 to 20 years ago. And I was sitting on the beach, and I'm going to level with you. It's not the lightest reading I've ever had on the beach, but it was a great book. And I'm just curious, as a follow-up, because this came out in '91, like have the Jewish people like showed more chutzpah since then? Have we gone away from being I think what you thought was maybe second-class citizens, or have we done anything else in the last 20 or so years?
No, I think it's gotten much worse.
Really?
I think for the most part, Jews try very hard to assimilate, to go along with political correctness. We're a much more divided people now than we ever were. We used to unite around issues like saving Soviet Jewry and helping Israel. Today, some of the most strident anti-Israel voices on college campuses are Jews. And some of the most strident voices against basically Jewish values are Jews. We're a divided country, and Jews are as divided as anybody else. So no, I don't think that we've learned the lesson of the past, and the lesson that I tried to teach in chutzpah. People love the word chutzpah, but they still don't engage in chutzpah. Today, if you do something that is out of the political correct situation, you're ostracized, you're canceled. Maybe it took chutzpah,
right? You get shamed.
Yeah, it took chutzpah for me to defend the Constitution on behalf of Donald Trump. I'm a liberal Democrat. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I voted for Joe Biden. But I believe that the Constitution was being violated when they impeached Trump on the ground of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, neither of which are permitted by the Constitution. And so, although I'm not a Trump supporter, I defended President Trump in front of the Senate and lost many of my friends. Larry David, for example.
We read about that whole interaction.
Right, screamed at me, yelled at me, wouldn't talk to me. He said because I had patted on the shoulder Mike Pompeo, who was a former student of mine and who I worked in tandem with on the Abraham Accords. And I like Mike Pompeo, and I'll pat him on the back any day of the week. But that was too much for Larry David. So he stopped talking to me, and many of the cult members of the kind of Chilmark community up in Martha's Vineyard went along with it. When I had lunch with one person from Chilmark, 6 people called him and said, essentially, you've broken the rule. If you have lunch with him again, you're no longer a member of the cult. And so this kind of cultish behavior and they're all, most of them Jews, most of them anti-Israel Jews, but they're Jews of the hard left, and they brook no dissent, no tolerance. And so I think that the Jewish people today in America are not strong. The support for Israel is not strong, and it's too bad because Israel not only deserves our support, but needs it, regardless of who's in power in Israel. Israel is fighting existential enemies: the desire by the Iranians to destroy Israel through nuclear weapons, the desire of Hamas to destroy Israel through rockets, and we have to be united and fight back, and we're not doing it.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's thank you for that response. And I'm sorry to hear about the whole situation with Larry David. I hope over time you guys can reconnect or get reaffiliated. But
I doubt it. Look, I learned who my real friends are, and I learned who my fake friends are, and I move on. And I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. I base my life on principle. I defend people who I don't like, people who I disagree with, people who I fundamentally oppose. But I think I try to follow the tradition of John Adams, who defended the people accused of the Boston Massacre, Abraham Lincoln, who defended many terrible, terrible people, Clarence Darrow, Thurgood Marshall. All of these people defended really horrible, horrible people. But that's the role of the lawyer. But the Larry Davids of the world don't understand that. They think you're a team member. You have to belong to the team. You choose a team, the Red Sox or the Yankees, and you can't root for the team. And if you choose a team, in this case, the Democrats of the left, the radical Democrats, then you must not deviate from any of their policies. You can't question anything.
But you're a staunch defender of the Constitution. So if there's an issue that isn't interpreted right, like you're defending the Constitution. So like, is there anybody, I'm just curious, like, is there anybody you wouldn't defend if there was a violation of the Constitution and they came to you, like the best lawyer in America, appellate lawyer, and said, like, I need your help? Like, is there somebody that you wouldn't help? Like what?
Well, it's a good question. I have certain rules. I don't defend people who are in the business of crime. That is, I'm not going to become a consigliere to a crime family.
Okay.
So if a person's life job is a hitman or a terrorist or a drug dealer or somebody like that, and they want me to get them free so they can continue to do their bad things, I won't do that. So that's one rule. My second rule is I don't generally defend fugitives, people who are escaping justice. I was asked by Radovan Karadzic, the man from Serbia, to defend him while he's still on the run. And I said, no, but if he surrendered to The Hague, then I might consider defending him.
Sure.
And of course, I could never defend anybody if I had a conflict of interest, if it was somebody who attacked my family or somebody who was in some other kind of conflict. But I will never turn down a case because of the guilt of the defendant, because of what I thought he did was terrible. No, that's not what a lawyer should do. A lawyer should be defending everybody unless they fit into certain very narrow criteria.
Very good. So, Alan, tell us about your background, like growing up in New York, just real briefly about, going to yeshiva, that sort of thing, on your way up to going to Brooklyn and then Yale.
So I was the worst yeshiva student ever. I went to yeshiva elementary school and yeshiva high school, where I think my class in high school was 52 people. I think I was 45th in a class of 52. My first law case was the school said I couldn't take the state scholarship exam, and I needed to take scholarship exam. I came from a family without resources. I wanted a scholarship exam. They said, no, we're establishing a rule. You have to have an 80 average to take it. And I had like a 72 average, or in Hebrew was a 68 average. So they wouldn't let me take it. And I actually filed a lawsuit in the New York Board of Higher Education, and we won. And I was allowed to take the state scholarship, and I won it. I got a state scholarship. And from then on, I went to Brooklyn College, where instead of being last in the class, I was first in the class. So
were you just bored in like yeshiva? Do you think you were just bored with like the work, and that's why you couldn't sit still, sort of thing? Or you just...
No, I wasn't bored. I just hated what they were teaching us. I hated the doctrine stuff. I hated not being able to ask hard questions. But within a 5-year period, I went from worst to first. So in 1955, I was a very bad student. I had a very hard time getting into college. By 1961, I was first in my class at Yale Law School, editor-in-chief of the Yale Law Journal, potential Supreme Court law clerk, and being recruited by every major law school in the United States, Yale, Harvard, Stanford, Chicago. So from the worst to first. And I still can't figure out what happened in those 5 years, except that I was no longer in yeshiva. I was now in a Brooklyn college, which I loved, where I could argue with everybody and fight with everybody and get rewarded for it instead of being punished.
Right. So what was your experience? I mean, you've been at Harvard for so long teaching, but like, what was your experience like at Yale and law school? I mean, I think they asked you if you could be editor of the law review because of like your religious beliefs. Like, what was your experience?
Oh yeah, well, it was funny because I was a candidate for editor-in-chief, which is the highest position in law school. And some of the people said, well, can you do it? You only work 6 days a week. And I said, yeah, I got my grades working only 6 days a week, and they were the top grades. And so when they honored me for being editor-in-chief of the Law Journal, they created a mock issue of the Yale Law Journal with every 7th page empty to reflect the fact that I worked on Shabbos, on Saturday. But that was not a problem. Being an Orthodox Jew really wasn't a problem. I was a law clerk both on the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, and I worked 6 days a week. It became a problem when I got a job at Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, a predominantly Jewish firm. And when they found out I was Shomer Shabbos, that I was observant of Sabbath, they said, look, we really can't have you in the litigation department. We need somebody who's available 7 days a week. And so I went instead to Case Scholler, Fearman, Hayes and Handler, a great law firm. And I worked there, and they permitted me not to work on Saturday. And then when I went to Harvard Law School, they wanted me to teach on Saturday, and I said I couldn't do it. And as the result, the dean abolished Saturday classes for everybody, saying we can't have rules for one person.
Worked out well for you, I'd say, since you were the youngest professor ever at Harvard, right? So
yeah, and I taught there for 50 years. I had 10,000 students. I was one of the most popular teachers in the law school, but I don't think I could give a speech there today. I think if I gave a speech there today, there would be protests, there would be efforts to stop me, efforts to prevent me from speaking for 2 reasons. Number one, because I defended the rights of President Trump. And number 2, because I defended Jeffrey Epstein. And as the result of defending Jeffrey Epstein, one of the people that Jeffrey Epstein was associated with falsely accused me of having sex with her, which I never met, never heard of her, never knew her. And fortunately, she has emails which she tried to suppress, in which she essentially admits she never heard of me, never met me. She had to be told who I was, that I was the lawyer that did reversal of fortune. And then her own lawyer, in a tape recorded conversation, David Boies, said you couldn't have been in the places she said you were. She's wrong, simply wrong. Her other lawyer, Bradley Edwards, said after years and years of investigation, he's concluded that she did not have sex with any prominent people, but she said she had had sex with Leslie Wexner, George Mitchell, Bill Richardson, Prince Andrew, you name it. But her own lawyer said she didn't have sex with anybody.
You're countersuing them, right? You're going against.
I'm countersuing them. They're countersuing me. You know, I'm 83 years old.
I know. What the
last years of my life in litigation, I never had a single lawsuit until this woman falsely accused me. She ought to be in jail. Her lawyers ought to be disbarred. The lawyers know full well that she made up the story. She's already earned more than $5.5 million, maybe as much as $10 million in suing people of false allegations. Her lawyers are part of it. The lawyers are getting rich. She's getting rich, and reputations are being ruined just because the lawyers are prepared to essentially put her up to making these stories up. And that's what they've done. She said to her best friend, and we have a tape recording of it, that she didn't want to mention me because I didn't do anything wrong. She didn't know me.
She didn't even know who you were.
She felt pressured by her lawyers to name me. There's a word for that. And it's a felony.
Yeah, no, for sure. And she didn't even know, I think you stated she didn't know who you were, that you had written these books. And so I have a question actually going back to your time after law school about David Bazelon. Is that how I say his name?
David Bazelon was my mentor.
Yeah, so you said he worked you to the bone. I'm kind of curious what that means for you. He worked, but he was a mentor too. So obviously he taught you a lot.
He was a great mentor, but he made me come in at 8 in the morning. I usually didn't finish work until sometimes 10 o'clock at night. I couldn't work on Shabbos, but he sometimes came over to my house on Shabbos in order to work with me. He was a slave driver, but he was a brilliant, phenomenal, terrific guy. Look, I was 23 years old. I'm okay to work hard.
Yeah, no, that's a good
thing.
Yeah.
Today, he'd probably be reported for abusing his law clerks.
Well, that's
he made them work
interesting.
too hard. But that was the way I was trained.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because that's like one of the questions I'm getting to, like the difference between like kind of like the now and then. I mean, so have you, this is kind of a light question, like have you seen, obviously you probably heard of it, the 1973 classic motion picture, The Paper Chase? Like that.
Not only saw it, but I was a professor at Harvard at the time. He was a student there, and so of course I'm very familiar with the whole paper chase mentality.
Yeah,
and it was true. And I have to tell you, students learned a lot more when we made them work hard, and when we gave them C's if they didn't work hard.
Right.
Today you can't get a C. If you wanted to try to get a C at Harvard Law School, you probably couldn't do it.
So let me ask you about that, because I went to a school that wasn't Harvard Law School, the only law school in Rhode Island. And, back when I was going to law school, I think the feeling was, if you get to Harvard or Yale, you've earned your way to it. So you're just going to get A's and B's because of all the work sort of you've done prior your whole life. Whereas like the school that I was at, good school, no complaints, but it's kind of like rated on a bell curve. So like they fail people out like left and right. So is that the mentality? Like, is that the truth? Like, I mean, like you're saying, like people can't even, if they try to get a C, like they would probably complain, like they can't get it, that sort of thing. Is that how it works?
It's the way it works. I think that, over the last 20 or 30 years, great inflation, nobody can say anything negative to a student. It's the snowflake mentality. They don't feel safe. We need to, if you're going to be a lawyer, you got to be tough. You got to be able to fight back. You got to be able to do what I have to do now and fight back against false accusations. And otherwise, you can't really be an effective lawyer. And we're not training our students to be effective lawyers. We're training them to be complainers and whiners and trouble, avoiders. And I think it disserves education. It's true not only of law school, but it's true of education in general.
Yeah.
Education has stopped being questioning, and it's now propaganda in large part. Many of these programs are at law schools and at colleges are designed just to make people feel good. I used to tell my students, if you want to feel good, go to a gym or go to a therapist. But if you want to have every one of your values basically questioned, come to my class, and you'll sweat and you'll worry and you'll get upset. But that's the way teaching ought to be. Back to the paper chase. So did you practice the Socratic method? That's probably where it happened. Like for 50 years, I was the most Socratic teacher at Harvard Law School.
Really?
I used the Socratic method. As students said, there was no such thing as a right answer in my class. Every answer begot another question. And at the end of the class, the students' level of confusion was deepened. But I didn't give them answers. I didn't give them answers. They have to come up with their own answers. I gave them a methodology for thinking through problems, and I didn't teach them what to think. I taught them how to think.
And so, go ahead. Sorry.
No, and my students have turned out, some of them, to be, world leaders, and I'm so proud of my students. And but today, I think students are not being taught critical thinking.
So, what makes a good law student? Like you're a professor for 50 years. Like, obviously you have like the cream of the crop, the highest caliber. Like, what makes that good law student?
Well, in the first semester, the students who had a tremendous advantage were the students who went either to yeshiva or to Catholic Jesuit schools, because both in yeshiva and in Catholic Jesuit schools, you learn the Socratic method, essentially. The Talmud is the Socratic method. Much of Catholic teaching, and particularly Jesuit teaching, is based on asking hard questions. So, it's no surprise that a person like Antonin Scalia would be a great student. And his classmate, Nat Lewin, who went to yeshiva, would be a great student. So I would say for the first semester, having a good religious education is a tremendous advantage. It then dissipates over the years, and students pick up and learn how to do the Socratic method. But to me, the essence of a great student is somebody who questions everything. One of the most interesting students I had in my class was Ted Cruz, because everything everybody else said he disagreed with. And he was always making contrary arguments. And I didn't have to play the devil's advocate when he was in the class, because he was the devil himself. Right. He was arguing against a woman's right to abortion. He was arguing in favor of the death penalty. He was arguing, against all kinds of issues that were very conventional wisdom among Harvard Law School students. And it was great having him in the class.
That's great. And did he do that just to do it? Like just
No, he believed it. He believed it very sincerely. Yeah.
So like
students didn't love for it.
Do you think there's I'm trying to think, because I know you've been associated with like Yale and Harvard, but do you think there's like a big difference between like the caliber of law student at say like a tier like 12 law school and like a Harvard law, or what do you think about that? I mean, I know you're obviously used to teaching like the highest caliber of students with the best.
I've taught in many law schools. I've lectured in many law schools. The best students at much lower ranked schools are much better than the not best students at Harvard. Okay. And some of the greatest lawyers in American history, did not go to Harvard and Yale Law School, particularly trial lawyers. Harvard and Yale Law School don't turn out great trial lawyers for the most part. So I think you can go to any law school and be a great trial lawyer, great lawyer. I think appellate skills tend to be more focused on things that are taught at Harvard and Yale, but trial skills not so.
I think that's great information. Thank you for answering that. So, like, tell us more about. Just one more question about Harvard. Like, how do you feel that it's changed from when you first started there as a 25, 26-year-old professor, now 50 years later? Like, how has the culture changed for you?
It's not as tough. It's not as rigorous. It's not as demanding. It's not as good. There's too much political correctness at Harvard, too little willingness to take on identity politics, ideological politics. I don't know how I would do at Harvard today. I think students would be boycotting my classes. They'd be picketing my home and picketing my classes, not for anything I did, but for just what I've said and what I believe and who I represent. So, part of the reason I miss teaching at Harvard is I like a good fight. And if I were there, I'd be in a fight all the time with extreme radical students. Look, the radical left is the enemy today of liberalism, of liberty, of decency. It's intolerant. It's Stalinist. And it undercuts our constitutional values. The hard, radical, intolerant left are today the McCarthyites and the enemies of democracy. I grew up with right-wing McCarthyism, and I'm ending my career with left-wing McCarthyism, and I'm going to fight both of them with equal fervor.
Great. So, question about some of the clients you've had over the years. You're a staunch defender of the Constitution. Like, what would you say is like a big, and you've had some clients that they're kind of shamed in public, but you'll defend them. And like, so what would you say is like a theme, a common thread that some of your clients have that you've represented, like some of the defendants? Is there something like that's similar between all of them?
Well, there are two kinds of defendants I've represented. Some are very, very wealthy, very high profile defendants, because obviously the wealthiest clients, the wealthiest defendants have the ability to get the best lawyer they can. And, for whatever reason, they come to me. So I have represented, billionaires, many billionaires, and almost all of them made the same mistake. They gave up what they have little of in life, time, freedom, to get more of what they have unlimited amounts of. Wow. I mean, Leona Helmsley is accused of cheating on her taxes for, I don't know, a couple of $100,000 when she could write a check for $3 billion. And as a result of it, she lost her freedom, lost her ability to be with her husband in his last days. I would say the same thing is true of many, many defendants. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson could have sex with anybody. And he had sex with a young woman and she accused him of rape, I think wrongly, but she did in any event. And he had to give up years of his freedom and his ability to be a boxing champion to get more of what he had unlimited amounts of. That to me is the key fallacy. I've also, half of my cases are pro bono. So I've defended a lot of poor people, and sometimes for crimes that they didn't commit, sometimes for crimes they did, sometimes out of desperation. I've also defended a lot of people on political and ideological grounds. I defended Alan Cranston, a Democrat, in front of the Senate. People forget that when they think I'm a Trump supporter. I defended Ted Kennedy. I defended Governor Edwards of Louisiana. Yep. All Democrats until Trump. But the defense of Trump cost me friendships and associations. Yeah. People didn't remember that I defended so many Democrats over the years, because I don't pick my clients based on political parties or my own political preference. I will continue to defend Democrats, Republicans, as long as I feel there's a constitutional violation.
Right, of course. So let's just talk about OJ for a second. Did he do it?
You know, two things. Once I was getting a colonoscopy and the doctor, while I was under sedation, said that OJ do it. And he says, I don't remember, of course, and the whole story may not be true, but he says, I said under sedation, sorry, I can't tell you, it's lawyer-client privilege.
Yeah, okay.
That's one story. My second story is even better. When Bibi Netanyahu became the prime minister of Israel, I happened to be in Israel with my family. And so he invited us to the prime minister's office. So my wife and my daughter and I went to congratulate him. I had known Bibi since he was a young man. And he takes me into his private office and he says, so Alan, I have a very hard question I want to ask you. I thought it was maybe about Iran. He said, did OJ do it? I said, Mr. Prime Minister, does Israel have nuclear weapons? And he said, Alan, you know I can't tell you that. And I said, Mr. Prime, you know I can't tell you that. So we both understood there are things we couldn't talk about.
All right. Well, that's I like the response. So we'll take it. I know we're limited on time. I want to ask you, since you know the Constitution, and I really love constitutional law, and like that's sort of what got me interested in following you. So like, what's the proper approach to like reading and interpreting the Constitution? I know that there's like textualism and original understanding.
So let me give you the approach.
Give me the
find out what Larry Tribe says about something constitutionally, and then do the opposite, and you'll usually be in good shape. Tribe is the worst example of a result-oriented, alleged constitutional scholar for whom the Constitution always comes out on the side of his ideology, identity politics, partisanship. He always interprets the Constitution consistent with his own personal political values. He is the worst example of constitutional analysis in my lifetime, much worse than any of the people on the right. Scalia often came down with decisions that were against his ideology, interpreting the Constitution in ways that he disagreed with. For example, the Confrontation Clause of the Constitution. I challenge Larry Tribe to name one constitutional interpretation he ever came up with that wasn't consistent with his own ideology, his own politics, his own personal preference, his own financial benefits. He's a fraud. And there are many constitutional frauds out there who simply use constitutional analysis in order to further their own politics. I am exactly the opposite of that. I interpret the Constitution absolutely neutrally. I impose on myself a test called the shoe on the other foot test. What if everything were different? What if the person being charged were Hillary Clinton and not Donald Trump? Would I be making the same arguments? And the answer is yes, I would, and Tribe wouldn't. And there are others like Tribe for whom first you ask the question, does it help my client? Does it help my party? Does it help my ideology? And then you twist and turn the Constitution. I'll give you a perfect example. When Bill Clinton was president, Larry Tribe said that a sitting president could not be indicted while he was sitting. And that was his constitutional interpretation. People took it seriously because he was Bill Clinton. And then when Trump became president, he said, whoops, no, I changed my mind. A sitting president can be indicted. The only difference was Clinton and Trump. Right. The Constitution didn't change. Tribe's analysis didn't change. Tribe knocked my arguments in favor of President Trump. I guarantee you, if it had been Clinton, he would have been making exactly the arguments that he called bonkers, exactly the arguments, because for him, he has no principles. For him, it's only, does it help my side or doesn't it help my side? It's like it's Red Sox versus Yankees. You pick a team, and then everything that team does is good and everything the other team does is bad.
Right.
That's not the American way.
That's interesting. I like that comparison, politics or reading the Constitution in sports, because it's true. I mean, just the way that you look at a game and then the spin on what you're saying about politics, for sure. So tell me how the legal profession's changed over. So your legal like scholarship, you have transcended generations, and you've seen this all. I mean, so I'm curious if you could tell us like how the profession has changed over the course of.
Oh, it's dramatically changed. Look, I've written 48 books in my career. My latest book, which will be out very soon, is called The Case for Vaccine Mandates, which is getting people on the right very upset, and people on the left think maybe it's not strong enough. But in any event, so I write what I believe. I write what I think. I write very quickly. The legal profession has changed as a result of one word: money. It's no longer a learned profession. It's a business. Law firms, hire business consultants. They do everything for the bottom line. And there are two things that have happened. Number one, money, 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 money. But number two, ideology. So today, law firms can't represent unpopular defendants. You can't get a law firm to represent Harvey Weinstein, to represent Jeffrey Epstein. Probably couldn't even get some major law firms to defend me against a charge that was totally false, because the people in the firm say, we're going to protest. We're not going to do this. We're going to quit. We're going to have sit-ins if you defend A, B, C, D. And so the law business has become, at the same time, more ideological, and at the same time, more financially driven. That may sound inconsistent, but it's not, because they're both result-oriented and they both reject process. And the key to law is process. Felix Frankfurt said, the history of liberty, for the most part, is a history of procedure and process. And that's what I think is being neglected by lawyers today. They have no respect for process. The hard left doesn't care about process. They know the truth with a capital T. And so if you know the truth, you don't need dissent. Forget about free speech. If you know the truth, you don't need due process. Hey, if a woman accuses a man, the man must be guilty. The woman must be telling the truth. If a person on the left accuses a person on the right, hey, what do we need dissent? What do we need due process? We all know the left is the truth and the right is filled with lies. So process has suffered greatly. And my whole career has been based on process. Most of the cases I win based on process. I win based on science. I win based on the rule of law, not on ideology.
Wow. Okay. So if that's the case, like, what's your advice for young lawyers?
Well, what I worry about is the attacks on me for the Trump defense and the Epstein defense will discourage young lawyers from becoming the kind of criminal lawyer I am, Clarence Darrow was, F. Lee Bailey was, Thurgood Marshall was. I think you're going to get fewer of those. I think more law students are going to go into corporate acquisition, mergers, wills and estates, non-controversial areas of law. Because as one young lawyer told me, when I asked him, he was my research assistant, to help me on the research on the Trump matter, he said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I don't want to be Dershowitz. I don't want to be Dershowitz. I don't want to be attacked, and I don't want to be condemned. And so I did all the research on that myself, sitting in my room with old books. I did all the research myself. I didn't have a research assistant for my role as President Trump's lawyer in front of the Senate. And for the most part, I do my own work. I don't generally have research assistants.
Wow, that's just stop right. That's crazy. No research assistant for that work. I mean, that's, it's still an opportunity. I mean, even if people don't, that's wild. All right. So,
well, but I read cases differently, and I look at the law differently from students, and I need to be able to read my own cases. I need to be able to do my own interpretation. And I like doing the hard work. So that's that's what I will continue to do
Yeah,
until the good
okay.
Lord gives me, as long as the good Lord gives me the energy to fight back. I'll never stop fighting.
Gotcha. That's amazing. So, any regrets? Like, I mean, you've had an amazing like legal career. Like anything that
Yeah.
you like, you look back at and you say like, man, I wish I,
Yeah.
could have done
Well,
that.
the two things people ask me about all the time is I do not regret defending the Constitution on behalf of Donald Trump. That's what I
Okay.
should have done. That's what I did do. That's what I would do again.
Okay.
I do regret representing Jeffrey Epstein, not because of the role I played in defending him. I think I played an admirable role in defending him, because it resulted in me being accused and falsely accused. And, I have grandchildren and children. They live among people who believe some of that. And it has hurt me, and it hurt my family, hurt my wife. Nobody in my family, obviously, none of my friends believe this is true. But
Yeah.
people out there, you should go on Twitter. I'm called all kinds of horrible names. And that's why I'm fighting back. I'm suing Netflix because they presented
Right.
a false statement about me. I'm suing Virginia Giuffre. I'm suing David Boies. And I think ultimately I will be vindicated both in the courts and in the court of history.
Yeah, for sure. So I know you're on a time crunch. Like, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
I want to encourage people to be aggressive, tough lawyers who defend the guilty and the innocent, and who defy political correctness and conventions. That's the key to our success as a country, has been the willingness of a small number of people to fight back, whether it be in the 19th century, or 20th century, the 21st century. And if you don't have fighters for freedom, for justice, for liberty, it's so easy just to go along with the majority. And that's what happened during McCarthyism. That's what's happening at major universities today. So I encourage people to argue and fight back and challenge. And if you get in trouble for challenging, call me. I'll be happy to help you.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate you spending some time with me today. We're glad to have you part of the Lawyer Stories community. This is something I've been building for a little while. And, hopefully we can stay in touch, and I can ask you some questions and email you and whatnot.
That'd be great. Good luck on your show. It's an important one. Keep doing it.
Thanks you so much. Really appreciate that. Wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves. Cheers.
Thanks.